Picture a human blastocyst under a microscope. A translucent blob 5 days old, the size of a grain of sand. Inside, 46 chromosomes, thousands of genes, roughly 6 billion base pairs of DNA, an instruction manual for a one-of-a-kind human being. Now imagine a laser pulse snipping a hole in its outer shell so a microscopic pipette can suction up a handful of cells. And in that moment, someone decides whether this potential life gets a chance or gets discarded. This is PGT-P, preimplantation genetic testing for polygenic disorders. It is the newest and most controversial form of embryo screening, and it is already here. When a couple undergoes IVF, they might end up with anywhere from 1 to 10 embryos. PGT-P claims to read the genetic instruction manual of each one and predict which embryo is healthiest. Not just screening for obvious disorders like Down syndrome or cystic fibrosis. That has been done for decades. This goes further, much further. And look, the science here is not fake. Polygenic risk scores are a legitimate tool. Researchers have spent years building algorithms that can look at thousands of genetic variants and estimate someone's likelihood of developing diabetes, schizophrenia, heart disease. The studies are real. The data is real. In 2020, the first baby selected using PGT-P was born. Since then, estimates suggest hundreds more. This is not science fiction. This is happening right now in clinics to real families. But here is what the marketing leaves out. Polygenic scores for most traits explain only a few % of the actual variance. A few %. That means the vast majority of what makes someone tall or smart or prone to depression is not captured in these scores. Environment, upbringing, privilege, random chance, all of it swamps the genetic signal. And there is another problem. Many of these algorithms were trained on data that conflates genetics with socioeconomic status. When researchers validate within families, comparing siblings rather than unrelated people, the predictive power drops even further. In December 2025, the American Society for Reproductive Medicine, the main professional organization for fertility doctors in the United States, released a report. Their conclusion was blunt. PGT-P lacks proven clinical utility. It is not ready for clinical use. They raise significant scientific and ethical concerns. This is not some religious group or anti-science organization. This is the doctors themselves saying the technology is being sold before it is ready. And the companies responded the way companies always do. They kept selling. But while the doctors were hitting the brakes, Silicon Valley was hitting the gas. Because PGT-P is not just a medical technology, to a certain kind of tech-minded optimist, it is the ultimate optimization problem. You have multiple embryos, you have data, you have algorithms. You just need to pick the best one. And if you can pick the healthiest embryo, why not the smartest? Why not the tallest? Why not the one with the best statistical shot at the best life? Once you frame it that way, not selecting feels almost irresponsible. The first mover was Genomic Prediction, founded in 2019. They started with health screening, diabetes, schizophrenia, cancer risk. Respectable stuff. Then Orchid Health entered in 2023 with whole genome sequencing, claiming to catch even more. Then came Nucleus Genomics, which crossed the line everyone said would eventually get crossed. They started offering trait predictions, height, BMI, eye color, hair color, ADHD, IQ, handedness. You could literally rank your embryos by how smart they were predicted to be. And then there is Heliospec Genomics. In 2024, The Guardian published an undercover investigation. Hidden camera footage showed Heliospec employees offering to screen embryos for IQ. They had already worked with more than a dozen couples. Another startup, Harrisite, claims their screening can give you 6 to 9 extra IQ points. They charge $50,000. 6 to 9 points, that is what they are selling. Not health, not disease prevention. A number on a scale that was never meant to rank human worth. The money behind this is not small time. Elon Musk, Peter Thiel, Brian Armstrong, the CEO of Coinbase, Balaji Srinivasan, the former Coinbase CTO, Sam Altman. These are not fringe figures. These are some of the most powerful people in technology, and they are either funding embryo selection startups or using the services themselves. Siobhan Zillis, a tech executive who had children with Elon Musk, attended a backyard dinner party in Austin hosted by an embryo screening startup founder. The guests wore pastel baseball hats. The hats said one word, Babs. And it is not just money, it is a worldview. On Less Wrong, the Rationalist Community Forum, someone published The Practical Guide to Super Babies, a step-by-step walkthrough of how to use embryo selection to optimize your children. Scott Alexander, the most influential voice in that community, wrote a detailed, mostly sympathetic breakdown of the entire field. On the Effective Altruism Forum, people discuss compassionate eugenics as a cause area. The language is careful, the framing is intellectual, but the destination is the same. There is a playbook here, and it is worth naming. Step 1, start with something uncontroversial. Screening for cystic fibrosis. Nobody argues with that. Step 2, expand to polygenic disease risk. Diabetes, cancer, still sounds like health. Step 3, offer trait data as a byproduct. The same test that checks for schizophrenia risk also happens to predict IQ. Step 4, let startups cross the line while established companies maintain plausible deniability. Step 5, frame anyone who objects as anti-science, religious, or afraid of progress. It has worked before. I'm working now. But here is the thing that should make everyone pause. There is an enormous gap between what this technology can actually deliver and what people are paying for. A 2021 paper from the European Society of Human Genetics said no clinical research has been performed to assess diagnostic effectiveness in embryos. A 2025 paper in the Journal of Clinical Medicine said the same thing. No comprehensive evaluation. None. People are spending tens of thousands of dollars on predictions that have never been properly validated for this use. Let me put the IQ claims in perspective. Harrisite says 6 to 9 extra points from screening. Sounds impressive until you realize that IQ tests have a standard deviation of 15 points. 6 points is less than half a standard deviation. It is the difference between scoring in the 52nd percentile and the 58th percentile. That is not a genius. That is barely above average. And that is assuming the prediction even works, which, given that polygenic scores explain a few percent of intelligence variance, is a massive assumption. But here is what the companies know. Their customers are not reading the caveats. One study found that 82% of respondents would use polygenic embryo screening if they were already doing IVF. 82%. The demand is already there. The technology does not need to be good. It just needs to be available. And the marketing does the rest. Algorithms trained on incomplete data. Predictions that sound scientific. A price tag that makes it feel premium. The perfect product for people who see their children as optimization problems. Here is something that should terrify you. In the United States, there is essentially no regulation of polygenic embryo screening. The FDA regulates drugs and medical devices. PGT is classified as a clinical laboratory service. It falls through the cracks. A global review published in March 2026 found wide regulatory gaps in countries around the world. There is no agency checking whether these predictions are accurate. No one is verifying the claims. No one is making sure parents understand what they are actually buying. The entire industry is self-regulated. Now I want you to sit with something uncomfortable. PGT-P can screen for conditions like Down syndrome, deafness, dwarfism, conditions that are already screened for with older technology. And every time an embryo with one of these conditions is selected against, a message is sent. That message is, people like you should not exist. The disability rights community has been saying this for years. They are not anti-science. They are asking a question that the optimization crowd does not want to answer. Who decides which lives are worth living? There is a word for selecting humans based on desired traits. The word is eugenics. And I know that word makes people uncomfortable. I know the immediate response is, this is not eugenics, this is parental choice, this is different. But is it? The Heritage Foundation called it consumer eugenics. A Duke University Press chapter called it neoliberal eugenics. Researchers in Singapore coined the term confucianics for the East Asian iteration. The language is evolving because the practice is evolving. The old eugenics was state mandated. The new one is market driven. The mechanism changed. But the logic did not. And let us talk about who can actually access this. $50,000 for Harrisite. Tens of thousands for IVF cycles that may need to be repeated to get enough embryos to select from. This is not a technology for everyone. This is a technology for the wealthy. And what happens when the wealthy can buy genetic advantages for their children on top of every other advantage they already buy? Better schools, better nutrition, better healthcare, better networks. You do not need to be a sociologist to see where this leads. You get a genetic upper class. Not metaphorically, literally. There is an assumption baked into all of this that deserves to be challenged directly. The assumption is that how a person turns out is primarily a product of their innate biology, their genes, their DNA. But we know this is not true. Decades of research show that environment, privilege, education, nutrition, trauma, social support, these things shape outcomes at least as much as genetics, maybe more. The polygenic scores are picking up statistical noise and calling it destiny. And the people buying these tests are the same people whose children will grow up in the most privileged environments on Earth. The genes are the least interesting variable. MIT Technology Review put it perfectly. Embryo selection is less like a build-a-baby workshop and more like a store where parents shop for their future children from several available models, complete with stat cards. Think about that. Stat cards, like baseball cards, like video game characters. You are not creating a life. You are selecting a product. And the unselected embryos, they are discarded, thrown away. Not because they were sick, not because they had a devastating disease, because they scored 6 points lower on a prediction that barely works. Here is what this is really about. It is not about health. It is not about preventing suffering. If it were, the technology would be targeted, limited, carefully regulated, and offered equitably. This is about a worldview that sees human beings as optimization problems, that believes every outcome can be improved with better data and better algorithms, that treats children not as gifts to be received, but as products to be designed. And that worldview is not new. It is the same impulse that has driven every eugenics movement in history. It just has better branding now. There is one question that nobody in this industry wants to answer. If you can select for intelligence, what else can you select for? personality, temperament, aggression, compliance, political orientation, sexual orientation. The science is not there yet, but the trajectory is clear. Every year the algorithms get better. Every year the predictions get slightly more accurate. And every year the line between health and enhancement gets harder to see. The question is not whether we can do it. The question is whether we should. And that is a question that no algorithm can answer. And here is the part that haunts me. For every embryo that was selected, there were others that were not. Embryos that had the potential to become a person who might have been funny or kind or creative or brave, a person who might have changed the world in ways no polygenic score could predict. But they were discarded because a statistical model said they were less optimal. We will never know who those people could have been. That is the cost that does not show up on any balance sheet. So what do? I am not going to stand here and tell you the answer is to ban all genetic testing. Screening for devastating single genuine disorders like Tay-Sachs or Huntington's disease, that is a genuine good. Nobody should have to watch their child die of a preventable genetic disease. But there is a line between preventing suffering and optimizing for advantage, between health and enhancement, between accepting a child and designing one. And we need to find that line before the market finds it for us, because the market has already shown us where it stands. This is not really about embryos. It is about what kind of society we want to live in. One where children are born into a world that already ranks them by their parents' wealth, and now by their genes too. Or one where we decide that some things should not be for sale? That some choices are too important to leave to the market? That technology is not going away. It is only going to get more powerful. The question is whether we will have the courage to set limits before the limits are set for us. Remember that blastocyst under the microscope, the translucent bundle of cells the size of a grain of sand, the instruction manual for a one-of-a-kind human being. The question was never whether we could read that manual. We can. The question was always what we would do with what we found. And right now the answer is we rank them, we sort them, we discard the ones that score too low, and we call it progress. I think we can do better. I think we have to.